The doors opened without ceremony, but everything beyond them was deliberate. Warm light spilled across polished stone floors, catching on glassware and silver cutlery arranged with mathematical precision. The air carried a careful balance of butter, citrus, and something deeper, something aged and expensive. Voices stayed low, trained to never rise above elegance. This was a place designed to remind everyone inside that they were fortunate to be here. She paused just inside the threshold, not because she was uncertain, but because she was observant. She noticed how the maitre d' scanned guests from shoes to shoulders before offering a smile. She noticed how certain people were greeted by name while others were assessed first, evaluated in silence. She noticed how wealth announced itself here without sound, through posture, through confidence, through being expected. Her coat was simple, well-fitted, dark. No logo. No jewelry beyond a slim watch. She carried herself with a quiet steadiness that didn't demand attention yet didn't shrink from it either. The kind of presence that unsettled people who relied on hierarchy to feel secure. She approached the stand. "I have a reservation," she said. The maitre d' looked up automatically, then hesitated. The smile arrived late and didn't reach his eyes. His fingers hovered over the tablet. "Name?" he asked. She gave it calmly. He typed once. Then again. The pause stretched. A faint crease formed between his brows, not confusion, but resistance. He angled the screen slightly away from her, as though shielding the evidence from existing. "I'm not seeing it," he said. She leaned in just enough to signal certainty. "It was confirmed earlier today." Around them, the dining room continued its soft rhythm. A couple laughed quietly. A waiter poured wine with a steady hand. No one intervened, but more than a few people watched. The maitre d' cleared his throat. "Sometimes confirmations," he began, then stopped. His eyes flicked to her coat, her shoes, the absence of a familiar marker. He straightened. "We're fully booked tonight." Before she could respond, another presence joined them. Taller. Louder. Wrapped in authority that had never been challenged in this space. His jacket was crisp, embroidered with symbols of acclaim. He smelled faintly of smoke and truffle oil. "What seems to be the issue?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. The maitre d' gestured vaguely. "She believes she has a reservation." The word believed landed with intention. The man looked at her for the first time. Not fully. Just enough. His eyes swept over her the way one might assess an object in the wrong place. "This is a private dining experience," he said smoothly. "Not a tourist attraction." Her expression didn't change. "I'm either." A faint smile curved his mouth. It wasn't friendly. It was indulgent. The kind used when explaining rules to someone assumed incapable of understanding them. "We curate a certain atmosphere here," he continued. "It's important that our guests feel comfortable." The implication settled heavily in the space between them. She felt it, the familiar tightening in her chest. Not surprise. Not even anger. Recognition. She had encountered this tone in boardrooms, at auctions, in early meetings before her name carried weight. It was the sound of a door being closed without ever being fully opened. "I have a confirmation," she repeated evenly. He glanced at the tablet, barely pretending to check. "Even if there were a reservation," he said, lowering his voice just enough to feign discretion, "this may not be the right environment for you tonight." A nearby diner looked down at their plate. Another shifted in their chair. No one spoke. She understood then that this wasn't about availability. It never had been. For a moment, she considered pushing back. She could have named her credentials, her portfolio, the companies that depended on her signature. She could have watched the color drain from his face as realization set in. She could have made a spectacle of it. Instead, she nodded. "I understand," she said. The maitre d' exhaled, relief flickering across his features. The man's smile widened slightly, satisfied. She turned and walked toward the exit. Each step echoed louder than the last, not because of the floor, but because of the silence that followed her. The doors closed behind her with a muted finality. Outside, the night air was cool and sharp. The city moved around her, unaware of the small insult that had just occurred, unaware of how often such moments stacked quietly, invisibly, in lives like hers. She stood still for a few seconds, breathing. Not to calm herself, she was already calm, but to decide. Then she reached into her coat and pulled out her phone. The number was already saved. She didn't scroll. When the call connected, she spoke without preamble. "They declined," she said. There was a pause on the other end. "On what grounds?" She looked back at the glowing windows, at the silhouettes moving within. "None they'd admit to." Another pause. Then, quietly, "Do you want us to proceed?" "Yes," she replied. "All of it." She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her pocket. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass, composed, unreadable, untouched by the assumptions that had just been made about her. She turned away and disappeared into the city, leaving behind a restaurant that had no idea it had just made the most expensive mistake of its existence. Inside the restaurant, the night continued as if nothing had happened. Plates moved from kitchen to table in flawless timing. Wine flowed. Laughter stayed controlled and polite. The rejection at the door dissolved into a private joke shared among staff, retold with quiet amusement once she was gone. "She was convinced," one server whispered, shaking his head. "Absolutely convinced." The chef laughed, a short sound edged with superiority. "People mistake confidence for belonging," he said. "That's the danger of letting the wrong expectations in." By morning, the story had grown teeth. It moved through kitchens, wine bars, and private dining rooms, reshaped with each retelling. A woman who didn't fit the image. A reservation that never existed. A standard that had to be protected. Each version polished the restaurant's ego and sanded away any trace of doubt. The chef leaned into it. At an industry gathering later that week, he told the story openly, framed as a defense of excellence. "We're losing discipline," he said to a circle of nodding peers. "If we stop drawing lines, the experience loses meaning." Someone asked lightly, "Did she make a scene?" He smiled. "No. They never do." The laughter that followed was soft, complicit. What no one in that room noticed was how quietly the ground was shifting beneath them. The first sign came from the fish supplier. A delay? Just one shipment. Apologetic, vague, quickly forgotten. Then another delay, this time from the produce distributor. Then a sudden request to renegotiate payment terms from a long-standing wine partner who had never wavered before. The chef blamed logistics. The manager blamed inflation. They moved on. Then a private investor pulled out. No warning. No explanation. Just a short email citing strategic realignment. The restaurant had weathered worse, they told themselves. Its reputation was untouchable. Michelin stars were armor. But armor grows heavy when cracks begin to form. Staff noticed changes before leadership did. Shifts shortened. Overtime paused. Supplies substituted without explanation. The sommelier frowned at a downgraded delivery and said nothing. The kitchen adjusted, grumbling quietly. The chef remained defiant. "This is noise," he said during a staff briefing. "We don't react to rumors. We create them." The dining room stayed full, but something in the air felt tighter. Guests lingered less. Familiar faces stopped appearing. Reviews slowed. Not negative, just absent. Absence, he would learn, was more dangerous than criticism. Then came the emails. First from the bank. Routine but firm. Then from the legal firm that handled the restaurant's holdings, requesting an urgent meeting. Then a notice from the holding company that technically owned the building, asking for documentation that had never been requested before. The manager finally voiced concern. "Something's happening," she said one evening, standing in the office with a stack of papers. "This isn't random." The chef waved her off. "You're overthinking. This place has survived critics, recessions, pandemics. It will survive paperwork." But his confidence was starting to sound rehearsed. A week later, during service, a courier arrived. He asked for the chef by name. The envelope was thick. Official. The kind that changes posture the moment it's touched. The chef opened it in the office, alone. His eyes scanned the first page. Then the second. Then the third, more slowly. His jaw tightened. Change of ownership effective immediately. He read it again, certain he'd misunderstood. The restaurant's controlling stake had been acquired. Legally. Completely. Signed, sealed, and finalized. There was a signature at the bottom. A name he didn't recognize. He felt something cold slide into his chest. "This is a mistake," he muttered, already dialing a number. The call didn't go through. He tried another. Voicemail. By the time service ended, the news had spread through the building in whispers sharp with panic. Staff clustered in corners. The manager sat pale at her desk. No one knew what would happen next. The chef stood in the dining room long after the last guest left, staring at the tables he'd curated, the space he believed he owned through sheer talent and will. He told himself this was temporary. That power always revealed itself eventually. What he didn't know was that power had already walked through his doors once, and he had turned it away. The announcement went out quietly, without ceremony or explanation. No press release. No interviews. Just a formal notice circulated among staff and senior partners, written in language so precise it left no room for argument. A new controlling authority had assumed responsibility. All departments were to continue operations as normal until further instruction. Normal became an unfamiliar word overnight. The chef arrived early the next morning, earlier than he had in years. The building felt different before sunrise, too still, like a space waiting to be judged. He walked through the kitchen inspecting surfaces that suddenly felt less like achievements and more like evidence. Every station was spotless, every knife aligned, yet something intangible had shifted. The room no longer belonged to him in the way it once had. Questions followed him like shadows. The manager asked about the schedule. The sommelier asked about upcoming allocations. A junior sous chef asked, too casually, if the rumors were true. He answered none of them directly. He couldn't. He didn't yet know what the truth required. By midday, a meeting request appeared on his calendar. No subject line. Just a time and a location, the private dining room. He sat alone at the long table when the door opened. She entered without haste. The room reacted before he did. The space seemed to compress, the air growing heavier, quieter. She wore the same understated confidence as before, though now it carried an undeniable gravity. Behind her came people he recognized instantly, not from restaurants, but from boardrooms, legal briefings, and financial summits. Individuals whose presence meant outcomes, not opinions. He stood, instinctively. She looked at him fully this time. Recognition struck him late, like a delayed echo. The coat. The stillness. The eyes that never asked permission. The realization landed hard. She took a seat at the head of the table, setting a slim folder in front of her. "Thank you for coming," she said calmly. Not politely. Not warmly. Just truthfully. The chef cleared his throat. "I wasn't informed." "You were," she replied, opening the folder. "You just didn't recognize the authority when it arrived." Silence followed. Not the polite kind. The kind that exposes. She slid a document across the table. He didn't touch it. "You built something remarkable here," she continued. "Talent like yours is rare. That's why I was interested long before I walked through those doors." His expression tightened. "Interested?" "Yes," she said. "As an investor. As a partner. As an observer." He felt heat creep up his neck. "If you had identified yourself." She held up a hand, gentle but final. "If respect depends on identity, then it isn't respect. It's fear." Her words didn't rise. They didn't need to. She leaned back slightly. "When I came here, I wanted to see how this place treated someone who didn't announce power. I didn't have to pretend. You showed me exactly what I needed. The truth of it pressed against his chest, unforgiving. Around the table, no one moved. She continued, You rejected a guest based on assumptions you never verified. Not because you lacked information, but because you believed you already knew enough. He opened his mouth to speak, then stopped. Every defense sounded hollow before it formed. She stood and walked toward the windows, looking out over the city that had fed his ambition for years. This restaurant will continue, she said. It will keep its standards, its stars, its reputation. Relief flickered through him, brief and fragile. But the culture changes, she added. Immediately. She turned back to him. You will remain, she said, if you choose to. The room stirred. This wasn't punishment. This was something far more dangerous. A choice? He asked, disbelief edging his voice. Yes. You can learn. Or you can leave with your resume intact and your excuses unchallenged. He stared at her, searching for anger, for vengeance. There was none. Only clarity. What do you want from me? He asked. She met his gaze. Accountability. She gestured toward the door. Today, we open reservations to everyone. No silent vetting. No coded exclusions. If excellence exists here, it will survive transparency. He felt the weight of it then, not just the consequences, but the exposure. The staff would see. The guests would notice. The unspoken hierarchy would dissolve. And if I fail? He asked quietly. She smiled, just barely. Then the myth ends. The meeting concluded without ceremony. She left as she arrived, without lingering, without spectacle. Word spread fast this time. Faster than gossip. Faster than rumor. The staff sensed it immediately. Something fundamental had changed. Policies were rewritten. Training sessions scheduled. The front desk replaced discretion with procedure. For the first time, the rules were visible. The chef stood at the pass that evening, watching a diverse crowd fill the dining room. Some familiar. Some new. All treated the same. He caught his reflection in the polished steel, older than he remembered. Less certain. As service began, he realized something unsettling. The test had only just started. And for the first time since earning his stars, he didn't know if talent alone would be enough to save him. The first night under the new order felt nothing like an opening, and nothing like a closing. It felt like a reckoning stretched thin across white tablecloths and polished glass. The dining room filled steadily, not with spectacle, but with variety. Couples who had never set foot inside before sat beside patrons who had once been greeted by name. The rhythm of service held, but the atmosphere had shifted from guarded to watchful. She observed from a distance. Not hidden, not announced. Just present. Seated at a corner table with a clear view of the room, she listened more than she spoke, watched more than she ate. Every interaction told her something. A host correcting himself mid-sentence. A server catching an unconscious hesitation and pushing past it. Small moments, but revealing ones. The chef worked harder than he had in years. Not because the food demanded it, but because the room did. He moved through the kitchen with an intensity that wasn't driven by applause or reputation. It was driven by scrutiny. Every plate that left the pass carried more than technique. It carried a question: was excellence enough when stripped of arrogance? The answer came slowly. Guests stayed longer. Conversations deepened. Laughter grew louder, less controlled. The room began to feel alive in a way it never had before, not curated, but earned. She noticed the staff first. The junior server who had once kept her eyes down now met guests confidently. The line cook who had never spoken in meetings offered a suggestion that improved a dish. The manager stopped bracing herself for conflict and started planning again. The chef noticed it too, though he resisted the implication. For days he told himself this was temporary, a novelty that would wear off. But the feedback said otherwise. Comments mentioned warmth, authenticity, a sense of welcome that hadn't existed before. One evening, as the last guests left, she stood. The room fell quiet almost immediately. Not because she demanded it, but because people sensed the moment mattered. She addressed the staff simply. "I didn't come here to erase what you built," she said. "I came to remove what limited it." No applause followed. Just understanding. The chef stepped forward then, slower than before, stripped of his performative confidence. He stopped a few feet away from her, posture rigid, pride wounded but intact. "I was wrong," he said. The words sounded unfamiliar in his mouth. They tasted like humility and loss, but also like something lighter. She studied him for a long moment. "Wrong is forgivable," she replied. "Refusal to change isn't." He nodded once. "I won't pretend I understand everything yet." "You don't need to," she said. "You just need to listen." Weeks passed. The restaurant didn't lose its stars. It gained something else instead: loyalty. The kind that doesn't come from exclusivity, but from belonging. Reservations filled faster than before. Not because of scarcity, but because of trust. Stories spread, but this time they carried a different tone. Not whispers of rejection, but accounts of welcome. Of a place that had confronted itself and survived. She didn't stay forever. Ownership didn't require presence. Impact didn't demand visibility. She returned when necessary, when decisions required her hand, when direction needed reaffirmation. Each time, the space felt less like a battlefield and more like a shared responsibility. The chef changed too. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. But undeniably. He listened more. He spoke less. He learned that mastery wasn't diminished by inclusion, it was sharpened by it. One night, months later, she arrived unannounced. The host greeted her without hesitation, without recognition beyond courtesy. Exactly as it should be. She took her seat. The room hummed with ease. No tension. No proving. Just presence. When the chef noticed her, he paused. Not in fear. In respect. He sent a dish to her table, not as a gesture of apology or favor, but as an offering. Something new. Something refined not just by skill, but by perspective. She tasted it slowly. It was excellent. When she stood to leave, he approached her quietly. "Thank you," he said. She met his eyes. "For what?" "For not destroying this place," he answered. "When you could have." She smiled, soft but unwavering. "Destruction is easy," she said. "Transformation takes discipline." She stepped outside into the night, the city alive around her, unaware of the quiet revolution that had taken place behind those walls. The restaurant glowed behind her, not as a fortress anymore, but as an open door. And somewhere between humility and excellence, it had finally learned what true class meant.